All right, turn in place animations, probably the least covered, most essential thing, I don't know, that I've seen with Unreal Engine or any other engine for that matter. Basically, turn in place is where your character turns and the legs turn, and you'll see it when we're done, but basically what we have is from previous videos. So we did 3 previous videos where we had our character move around, that it's replicated. Here, let me get this out of the way so you can actually see what's going on. Okay, so replicated movement, but when you go to turn in place, he doesn't do anything. He just spins like there. So what we want to have happen is we want to have the upper torso move while the legs at the bottom stand still until we hit a certain degree. We can change that degree, but we're going to make it 45 degrees. And as soon as it hits 45 degrees at top, the legs are going to turn, and it's going to look good. And then obviously when you're moving around, it's not going to do it. I've seen this done only correctly one time, and the person who did it, you could tell he was doing it on the fly without a whole lot of prep, so the final product wasn't really 100% usable. It was very close, but it wasn't quite there. But we're going to take you all the way there, get your turn-in-place animations working. That being said, this is going to be a very painful process, so bear with me as I make mistakes, as I surely will. And the other thing, the animations that are being used are part of Rifle Anim Set Pro. You do not have to buy those animations. You don't have to buy them. You can find animations all over the place. I'm using them just because they're great. So I'm using those animations. I'm going to also use an aim offset. It's already pre-made. If you don't know how to make an aim offset, there's 100 different tutorials you can look on how to make an aim offset. So I don't want to waste time doing stuff that has already been covered a million times. I want to show you stuff that's either never been covered or been covered one time. And so we're going to do that. So I think I covered everything I wanted to say up front. So make sure, if you haven't followed along with the previous videos over the basic movement, that you go back and watch those if you need them. I mean, either way, I recommend even just watching this through first, just to see what the final product is going to be and to get an idea of what you're going to undertake. So anyway, let's begin. So we're going to use this character's blueprint. So you can go to open the blueprint to find it. I'll just show you all the shortcuts on how to get there. Get to your mesh, and down here you'll see the assigned animation blueprint. You can follow this tree over here. I've kept things pretty much the same as how Unreal has it out of the box. So let's open this up. This is our class for our animations. We already did a make direction function. So what we're going to do is we're going to make one for turn in place. So let's just call this turn in place. And right away, let's go ahead and get a reference to our pawn, and that's going to be our character. Okay, and we want an object reference. So we go to pawn, object reference. Okay, and then we'll just call it in pawn. Okay, so what we first need to do, we're going to need to make a few variables. Let's go ahead and start off with one that's going to be our character yaw. So do the little plus. And you can change the values at either spot. But we don't want this to be a Boolean. We want it to be a float. And that is a member variable. Okay, and then what we want to do next is make I think it's going to be a local variable. Yep, local variable called character yaw last tick. Now, if you remember what we talked about, local variables are variables that get reset every time this function is ran. So it doesn't save anything. It's more efficient, and it's really helpful, especially when you're dealing with bools and stuff. But we're definitely going to use it here. So right off the bat, what we're going to do is get our character yaw and get our character yaw last tick, which means last time it was ran, and we're going to save it here. This is because we are going to find our character yaw as the function goes on, and we want to save what it was the last time this function ran. That way we can compare previous and this current frame. So after that, we're going to go ahead and pull off our yaw. We're going to get our actor's rotation. I cannot type. So there it is. And we need to split the struct pin. Right click, split the struct pin, and we get our pitch. I'm sorry, we're going to use our yaw. And then we're going to immediately set our character yaw. Since character yaw is a member variable, it gets saved. So let's get our yaw, go into here, connect those up. So now we have our character yaw and the yaw last tick. So now we can compare them. So if we take our yaw last tick, and by the way, yaw is like this. When your character's moving, when he's, when he looks like he's doing the ice skating, twirling around, when you do this motion, that's his yaw. So get the character yaw last tick, and the character yaw, we're going to subtract them. And then that way we now have our difference. And we can do another local variable, yaw change over frame. We're going to set it. So now this right here represents how much the yaw has changed from one frame to the next frame, and that's going to be very important as we go along. So before we do anything else, we need to check our speed. So we get our speed, because basically if we are over the speed of 0, which means we're moving, we don't care about turn in place, because turn in place only occurs while you're in place, which means not moving. If you turn your yaw while you're moving, your character is going to change direction, and his walking animations are going to cover. It'll look right. So let's get a new variable, and we're going to call it it's going to be a member variable, so it'll be a saved value, root yaw offset. And this is what this whole thing is all about, our root yaw offset. When we're moving, we just want it to be a value of 0, because it doesn't matter. So everything important is going to happen off of this false pin. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our, yaw change over frame, and then we are going to add that to our, let me get this right over here, root yaw offset. So we'll add these together. Okay, and we want to normalize the axis. Move that down a little bit. Q for queen, straighten them out. And actually, we want to make sure we keep it below here, so we're not confusing ourselves. And let's get our root yaw offset here. And we're going to set it there. Okay, yaw change over frame plus our root yaw offset. We're going to normalize it and then set it into the root yaw offset. Okay, so these animations that I have already, like I said, you can use your own animations for this, and I'll show you how to set up. We're going to use what are called curve values, and when I go, I'm going to have to make them. I haven't made them yet, and I'm going to make them with you because my set didn't come with them, and most animations don't come with them, so I think it's reasonable for me to show you how to do that. But basically, the curve value is as the character turns, the animation spits out a value, and we want to grab that value. So we're going to get curve value, and this will name as, so I don't know how to name this because It's technically a float, but we treat it as a bool. Normally I do a bool. I'll put a little b in front of there, which is standard. But technically it's a float, but we're going to kind of treat it as a bool because we're going to say, hey, if it's greater than 0, we're going to do something. But we'll just leave it as turning for now. You can name it whatever you want. But I'm going to promote it to, and I'm trying to remember, do I make this a local variable or not? Yeah, I do. So promote to a local variable, and we'll call it turning. Okay, so we get our turning. Really, it's really hard concept to show or to describe. I'll just have to keep showing. So basically, if the float value that thing spits out is greater than 0, so branch, hold B boy, click left click, you'll get your branch. Okay. We only want to do it if it's going to be true. And we're going to get our distance curve. And I don't think, yeah. And we want that to be a member variable. Just backing up here a little bit, make sure I have my notes correct. Distance curve. And remember how we did the last frame thing, where we're going to do the same exact thing here, where we have distance curve last frame. Okay. We actually want our getter. There we go. So before we do anything to distance curve, we want to save what its current value is, since it's a member variable and it's saved, and put it into our local variable, distance curve last frame. And so we have it right there. So our animation is going to have two values coming out of it. It's going to be the value, whether it's basically turning or not. That's all we're going to check. Hey, are you even trying to do anything? And then we're going to have another curve that is actually spitting out that 0 to 45. So I might have misspoke a little bit before. It's going to have two. One is just going to be telling us, is it doing anything at all, 0 to 1. And then we're going to have another value that's tracking those values as they spit out. Okay? So we're going to call that one, let me bring it up. Distance curve. Turning, so are you turning? And then distance curve. And then we will set that to a value here. Set. Okay. I guess I didn't need this extra guy here for now. Okay, so similar to what we did, got our distance curve saved the last frame, and now we have last frame and our current frame of the distance curve. That's all that talking was for. Now, a root yaw offset, which we haven't really done a whole lot yet with. If this value is greater than 0, we want to do something. And we'll use our select node. Looks like a little pitchfork. And with it, we're going to set a value called negative or positive. You guys could find a better name, I'm sure. And basically, it's going to hold a negative or positive 1 value. So for it true, we're going to be at -1. And for it false, it's just going to be 1. Just because of how animations are, if you're going to the right, if you're turning if the root yaw is turning to the right, you're going to want to affix a -1. And if you're turning the other direction, if they're going the other way, if the root yaw offset is less than 0, it's just going to be a standard 1. And you'll see why in a minute. I'm not even going to bother going into super detail on some of these because they won't make sense until you see it all put together. So what we need to do is get our distance curve last frame, subtract from our distance curve, take that number, get the absolute value, which means if this turned out to be a negative, it'll strip. It's just the distance between those two values. So if you have positive and negative, it just strips off the negative and tells you if you were to count those numbers, what it would be. And then we're gonna have, let's see, we haven't done that yet. So another variable. We'll go ahead and promote that to a variable, local variable, and we'll call it distance curve difference. Say where we're at because we get a crash. Okay, so we got our distance curve difference. We want to get the absolute value of that. And we are going to set our ABS. I'm sorry, I was pulling from another graph. Promote that to, have we done this yet? Hang on just a second. Make sure I have my variables. We have not. ABS root yaw offset. And let me back up here, make sure I have everything in order correctly. So we do our select nodes, negative or positive. Come over here, I got our ABS, setting our distance curve difference. And just so things aren't as confusing, I'm going to pull off of there. And we're just going to work with new nodes. Take your distance curve difference, multiply it, float by float, take our negative or positive number, put it into here, then take our root yaw offset, subtract, and that then will give us, if I can get this junk out of the way. Our root yaw offset, which we can set. Then we can get the absolute value of that. And then we have our ABS root offset. Just like that. Okay. So we need to do a variable here and call it our maximum member variable. Maximum turn in place angle. So this value will always be the same. And we're going to set it to, let's do 45. You can change this to whatever you want. This will be one that you definitely want to pay attention to as something that you can adjust later on. So just remember that if you want your character to be able to turn a little bit more before his legs go, this would be the value you change. So come out of here, I'm going to subtract from here. All right, and I got a little bit ahead of myself, so I'm just going to move this over. We first need to check if it's greater than our maximum, right? Because we don't want to do anything unless it's gotten higher than that value. So if it's gotten past our maximum turn in place angle, then we're going to do something. This. Subtract that out of there. Make a new local variable, you auto subtract. Lost it. So at this point, I'm just going to grab our root yaw offset and get it over here so things are going to be a little clearer. This is a variable we already set. And we want to check something here. We want to say, hey, if you're greater than 0, let's do something. Branch here. Bring this down just like this. If you're getting frustrated, like, oh, why doesn't he explain all this? I'll go through it. I just want to get it all out here so we can go through it as one piece rather than, I just don't want to miss anything. So, and instead of a branch, let's use our trusty select node. And get our, let's see, where is it? You got to subtract. Multiply that. We don't want an int. We want a float. And float by float. Make that -1. And we'll do another one over here. Only this one will be a positive one. Okay, and if it's true, it's going to be positive. And if it's false, it's going to be negative. And then that will become our new yaw to subtract. Get your root yaw offset. Subtract. Just trying to find the cleanest way to do this. When you get into this situation, do something like that. Help yourself out. We will finally set our root yaw offset. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and check my work now. Okay, so let's go back through our work and make sure everything is correct and give you guys kind of an overview of what we did in case you got lost along the way. And I'm just going to go through this nice and slow, panning my screen so you can see what's going on. Basically, taking the last tick and comparing it against our character yaw, subtracting, getting yaw changed over frame. You're going to see a lot of local variables. You can check over here to see whether they're local or not. Some of them you could say, well, they weren't necessary, but they for me or for organizations, sometimes it's worth making a local variable to keep track of it, especially when you're in blueprints because it can get a little hairy with these lines going everywhere. I check if the speed's greater than 0. If it is, we don't do anything. We just leave our root yaw offset alone. By the way, our root yaw offset is going to be what is a major component when we go to control the animations. We take yaw change over frame, add it to the root yaw offset, normalize it, save it. Then we get our turning curve from the animation as it plays. If it's greater than 0, we're going to do something. We are distance curve, save it, So that way we can compare distance curve last frame. We grab the distance curve. If the root yaw offset is greater than 0, we're going to be at -1. If it's false, we're going to be at 1. We save that value. Subtract the distance, or subtract distance curve from distance curve last frame. Get the absolute value of that. Save as the distance curve difference. Multiply distance curve difference times our negative or positive number, and subtract that from the root yaw offset, and save it to our root yaw offset. We get the absolute value of the root yaw offset, save it to a variable ABS root yaw offset, see if that value is greater than our maximum turn in place angle. If it is, we are going to subtract the ABS root yaw offset from our maximum turn in place angle, save it as the yaw to subtract. Take our yaw to subtract. If the root yaw offset is greater than 0, we are going to set that to 1, and if it's false, -1. Save it into there as our new yaw to subtract, and then the root yaw offset minus the yaw to subtract, and save it here as our root yaw offset. Now, if you can find a better way to do this, it's very possible in these long equations that you do something a little redundant. Maybe I did one more than I needed to, negative, positive thing, maybe, but I just know that this worked for me, and it was a little custom work off of what I had seen done by one other person. So I'm going to save that here, and here might be a good time to take a break, and when we come back, we will start on part 2, which will cover the actual animation graph and setting up our animation curves. That might be into 2 different videos. We'll just have to see.